It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome, and this is the Redbird Reboot podcast. I'm here with my co-host Marcos Labrada, aka at Pancake Soul. And Marcos, we're down 2 weeks for the Arizona Cardinals. They are 1-1 with a blowout win over the Los Angeles Rams. First time in a decade that the Cardinals have beaten the Rams at home. They didn't just beat the Rams, they clobbered them. This is obviously a lot to talk about as far as, Cardinals offense being good, the Rams injury problems, some of the play of Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of storylines here at week 2. Before we begin, how are you doing for those who are watching on your YouTube channel? Make sure you follow, or those who are listening to this podcast.
I'm doing good, especially after that big win that we had, 41-10. We usually get trounced by the LA Rams. We've known that for probably like you just mentioned, almost like a decade. They've been a thorn on our side, and it just kind of feels good to finally be able to not only beat them at home, but go back to just just going back to basics when it comes to beating these teams that we can't seem to beat.
Absolutely. The Cardinals had been a team that had lost, and if you want to look at correlation, causation, whatever stats you want to talk about it, Aaron Donald comes into the NFL during that year. 2014 Cardinals don't win at home, at least since that year. They've had some close calls, but a lot of blowout losses. And this was, Marcos, a game in which the Cardinals scored on their first 4 possessions. The game, they scored touchdown, 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 all there within, I believe, the first quarter. They got kicked a field goal, and it was pretty much game over for the most part coming in out of the half after the Los Angeles Rams drove down the field and went for a touchdown play from the Arizona 4. The defense actually was a bend but did not break defense, and the Cardinals put it away, being able to go and grab a 70-yard touchdown coming out of the half. This was a game in which, Marcos, exiting the Buffalo Bills game, we said there's a few changes the Cardinals are going to have to make. They said they're going to have to figure out how are they going to protect with Kelvin Beachum in that backup role. They're going to have to figure out how they can manufacture a pass rush, especially against a weak Rams offensive line. Or they're going to have to find out how to cover Cooper Kupp. The last thing we said was they're going to have to figure out how to involve Marvin Harrison Jr. And boy, did they ever. Just the first drive alone, they targeted Marvin Harrison Jr. several times, including a long 23-yard touchdown, a crazy toe touch grab. They're able to force a couple of 3-and-outs for the Rams, and it really was the Marvin Harrison Jr. show. In the first quarter, he had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's one of the best home debuts, I guess we can say, for an Arizona Cardinals receiver ever, as far as being a rookie. It does not beat Anquan Boldin's rookie debut of 200 plus yards. I will say that, as far as someone asked, is this like the best quarter we've ever seen from a rookie wide receiver? And the answer is, Anquan Boldin had 134 yards and a touchdown against the Detroit Lions in the third quarter of his rookie debut. But this really is something that we have not seen for a while in Arizona, as far as we've seen the DeAndre Hopkins go off for a number of yards. We've seen Larry Fitzgerald go up and put up some big numbers. We have just not seen a rookie be able to show domination like that as Marvin Harrison Jr. did against Tre'Davious White. And Marcos, Cardinals fans like us who were saying you got to be able to get Marvin more involved, we were right. We feel a bit justified, at least, but it's good to see that the Cardinals, in that regard, were able to kind of prove this week that they needed to involve Marv more. They were able to. And at the same time, some of the coverages that we did see the Buffalo Bills play to take him out of the game did turn out to be a factor, as the Rams really did struggle to be able to have any sort of way to contain him in that first quarter.
Yeah. So there was something that was there was something that Kyler Murray said that was could have been taken two ways, and I agree with what he said, and I understand why people are upset about how he said it. Kind of made him sound like he was kind of being like a condescending or whatnot, but it was about the force feeding part because that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about like when people were talking and mentioning, hey, we need to get Marvin more involved. As you know, last week I kept trying to set the record straight when it comes to like concepts. You don't just have one receiver concepts. Most of the time, you do have like at least one or two to three like receivers, and you have like your first read technically, but that depends on whatever coverage you're facing. On certain coverages, whether it's man or zone, that first read is not your first read, depending on what kind of coverage they give you. So, and I posted about that bootleg. Marvin was not the first read on that. It was a flat, but they improvised. Kyler found him down the field and delivered the shot, which ended up being a great play and a great touchdown. My favorite play of the game. Um, it is not his job to force feed players. And a lot of people were mentioning that like we need to get him more involved as in force feeding. They were mostly talking about like hitch routes. They were mostly talking about like screens and whatnot. And I'm like, that's not Kyler Murray's job. That's not winning football. You can't win a football game by like saying, hey, we need to get this guy his grabs. That's like winning your fantasy football. That's like winning whatever it is you're gambling on because you're like, he needs at least 5 catches for me. Like, that's not how we win football games. The way we win football games is by maybe drawing up concepts where Marvin Harrison Jr.'s specialty is better used, as in like that back shoulder throw that you saw to from Kyler Murray to Marvin Harrison, looking like DeAndre Hopkins out there coming back. Those are the type of concepts where Kyler Murray's throwing it, getting that first down, and also when he's in scramble mode, Marvin Harrison Jr. is already versed enough to be able to know how to get open. So it's not his job to force feed players, but getting him this involved and how he did it, that was incredible. And I can't wait to see how every single game from now on. I'm just excited to see what kind of highlights we're going to see from these two players.
Yeah, for sure. We'll go over some of those highlights, but I did want to bring up a few other stats, at least within the game. Biggest one, at least, obviously, is that the Cardinals, when it came to the amount of plays that they had, what we really did get to see was Kyler Murray, at least in that first quarter, really targeted the deep ball. His average yards per attempt went much deeper than it did previously. One of the things, at least, that really stood out to me was that despite the fact that Arizona, we talk about throwing it deep to Marvin Harrison Jr., they had 14 rushing first downs in the game for the most part. And that's one of the things, at least, that you can also point out is that they never had to attempt a passing play on fourth down. So they weren't behind, they weren't trailing. They were effectively able to run the ball to the Rams. And then when they got the one-on-one coverages for Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, they took advantage of that. And that's something that I think when we're talking about with this Cardinals team that we didn't see last week is when the Cardinals had a lead, their run defense was pretty one-dimensional for the most part, at least, because that one dimension was getting run over by the Buffalo Bills. What we saw in this game instead was that they were able to have huge explosive plays. Now, I think that that's a combination of a couple of things. We'll be able to look into some of how their game worked and functioned, but the biggest takeaway ultimately is this is a Cardinals team that going into this game, we said, hey, they're 1.5 point underdogs. Rams have always beaten them up. There's a lot of missing linemen. You got to do two things. One, you got to make sure you get Marvin involved because Tre'Davious White did not do very well in covering Jamison Williams in week 1 against the Lions. And the second thing you have to do is you have to figure out, are you going to double Cooper Kupp, make sure he doesn't beat you? And what we really saw was that the Cardinals were able to not only stop Cooper Kupp, they also had an injured play, at least, where Kupp was, I believe, tackled at least and kind of mixed up his ankle. It was a little bit dragged under by Jalen Thompson. Not quite a hip drop tackle, but at least the closest thing to one of those sort of things that guys can just get dragged under. What we really saw was that the run defense actually was able to make adjustments. We saw Budda Baker firing off of the ball, and we got to at least see that in terms of tackles. the Cardinals did extremely well on the defensive side. Budda Baker led the team with 8 tackles. 8 of those were solo, 2 of them tackles for loss. They essentially said, hey, we're going to bring Budda Baker down and let him be the guy who can make plays in the box, keep our other corners and secondary guys back. It was a good adjustment that they were able to make. And at the end of the day, we'll talk a little bit more about defense in the second part of our show. This was one of those games that we've been waiting for a while because we've known that Kyler Murray is capable of having an elite game. We saw last year with Greg Dortch, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson. They were able to have a good run game, and Kyler was very efficient as a quarterback, but we still didn't see some of those big plays. We just wanted to see him kind of make those plays that are the top 5 quarterbacks make, those games in which where you're able to blow out a bad team. This was one of those games, Marcos, and that probably is going to redefine a lot for the Arizona Cardinals this season. If Kyler Murray is capable of playing to this level, the question at least is, how consistent is it that they're going to be able to play at this level? Because his jersey was sent to the Hall of Fame because of that 158.3 quarterback rating. He had a total of 250 plus passing yards and over 50 rushing yards. This was an all boxes checked sort of game for Kyler Murray, and it's something that we have not seen from him probably since the early 2021 season.
Yeah, that's what you just said about consistency is exactly what I was going to hit on next. I was listening to the PFF podcast going over like the performance and whatnot, and obviously we had tons of people ranking in their when it came to like their ratings and whatnot, especially like Dennis Gardeck being in the 90s as well. He had himself a phenomenal game. You had Kyler, you had Marv, you had Trey McBride in the upper 80s, I believe. He had himself a really good game, and I loved all the performances all around. But then they mentioned something that really kind of brought it down to reality again. They talked about how the Rams are really bad when it comes to like coverage, and it's been like their second year, and they're the worst coverage team in the league according to their ratings and whatnot. And so when you think about that, you're like, okay, but he still had a perfect game. Yeah, he still had to play football. Kyler Murray still had to throw the ball out there against NFL caliber players, regardless of who it was. He still had to connect with those throws. He still had to fit a ball between 2 defenders to Trey McBride. He still had to keep his eyes downfield to be able to like make sure that he can target and get Marvin Harrison Jr. those deep balls that he had. And he still had to throw that beautiful ball over the seam for that touchdown completion to Marvin Harrison Jr. And Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously did a great job making sure he catches the ball, keeps his feet inbound. And they all did their work. So regardless of the fact that like they were the worst coverage team, they still have to do all those things against an NFL caliber team. But consistency is exactly what we're looking for from here now. We need to see this type of performance, not 158 every single game. I mean, that would basically send you to the Hall of Fame right there and probably send us to the Super Bowl. But realistically speaking, we need to see more of these type of games. They don't need to be perfect games. They need to be above average, really good on both sides, on the offense and the defense. And we can possibly see ourselves in the playoffs if that's the type of performance we can see day in and day out.
No, absolutely. This is a spot where the Cardinals also, I think, have context that's added. So last week, what we talked about was spent a lot of time going over the film, looking at the first half, how they were able to run the ball, how Buffalo made some good adjustments. We also looked at how Von Miller was just wrecking the one side of the line with Kelvin Beachum on it. For the most part, we were concerned, like, how is this going to look? We do have a rookie in Jared Verse, and then also someone in Braden Fisk, who he was one of the guys that I was not as excited about because he came out of Florida State. He was a good playmaker, but he had shorter arms. And one of the things where when you can get long armed, we always talk about like long arm pass rushers versus short arms. He was not good against the run. There's a couple of different times that it felt like we'll see some of those in clips where he wasn't able to get off of blocks. So you're talking about having Aaron Donald, who was on the field. He's off of there now. No one's benefited more from that so far, I think, than Kyler Murray has as far as the post-Donald era. And putting Braden Fisk into that spot ended up being a net positive for Arizona. And as far as the other net positive, injuries is kind of the story of the Rams season right now, Marco. So if you want to talk at least about a team whose season is really kind of hanging by a thread, the Rams not only lost Cooper Kupp in this game, They've been down their starting tackles. They were missing guard Steve Avila. Kupp suffered an ankle injury and is likely heading to IR. They lost their safety, John Johnson, during the game, which essentially shows that there is really a lot of issues in coverage for the Rams. Their defensive line is fresh and new, so we got to see Arizona's experience and even some of that size roll them over. We also saw some weird oh goodness, at least I was looking through. We also had, at least in that game, Jonah Jackson, also the starting guard for the right-hand side, had a fractured scapula, who was headed to injured reserve. This is in addition to Steve Avila being injured. You're talking about like 3 to 4 of your starting offensive linemen are out. That played, I think, a part in the game. Matthew Stafford was not able to get into a passing rhythm. There were not targets like a Cooper Kupp. He was able to get the ball too. Kyron Williams still had a touchdown on the day. But this is one of those places in where the Cardinals got 5 sacks of Matthew Stafford. And with how many of these injuries have happened in the first 2 weeks, you kind of feel like that Arizona is actually able to have a little bit of life now within the NFC West. They're at 1-1. The Seahawks are 2-0. They have beaten the Broncos, was one of the games that they played, as well as the Patriots. 2 of the probably teams in the NFL we've expected to have top 5 picks this year. It does feel like that not only is there opportunity for Arizona that hadn't been there previously, it does feel like that after 2 weeks, we can take a look at the Buffalo Bills and say, hey, we probably underestimated how good that team is. The Buffalo Bills went up against the Dolphins, and Tua Tagovailoa leaving with a injury, they clobbered the Dolphins 31-10. So you're talking about a Cardinals team that kept it close against the Buffalo Bills. Not only that, on the road, and then came back home and blew the doors off of the Rams. There's some really cool stats that you can look at that show where things have been in the NFL this year, Marco. So I'm going to take a quick look at some of those. So the biggest one that will pop up, at least, is going to be in terms of overall offense. So let me go ahead and, for those of you on our call, make sure I get my screen shared here. And that shared 2024. So as far as your total offense, and these are the numbers that you'll want to look at as far as total offense, passing offense, rushing offense, and then points per game. If you're going to be a playoff team, you have to be in the upper echelon of one of these options. You're not going to be able to have a team that is low in yards per game, but is defensively, you'd have to be so elite in that category. So that the Cardinals are about 7th ranked in offense through 2 games for the most part. As far as passing yards per game, they're in the top half. The biggest area, of course, is in rushing yards per game. They're in the top 5. They also have been able to see, at least as far as with special teams or with others, they've been able to at least go up and are 2nd in points per game only to the New Orleans Saints, who have surprised everyone this year with 2 blowout wins, one against the Panthers and then the follow-up against the Dallas Cowboys in that defense. Well, Arizona at 69 points has the 2nd most amount of points in the NFL. So then the question is, hey, if it's running the ball, if it's yardage, they're doing fine, at least as far as versus the pass, but they're running the ball. How much of this is a James Conner-centric offense? How much of this is a Kyler Murray-centric offense? Is Kyler just running all over the place? And we've kind of seen over the last 2 weeks has been that Kyler's been able to do it with his arms, with his legs, with just about everything. Some of the things that you can at least point to as far as when it comes to your quarterback rating. So there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. There's the traditional quarterback rating where a perfect score is 158.3. Now, obviously, it's not like you're saying you completed every pass. It's just there's some limitations to that score. It's a little bit of an outdated metric. What's good to look at is your QBR, quarterback rating, on a scale of 0 to 100. Pretty easy to see. These end up usually correlating with PFF grades more positively, where your statistics will align with what PFF does, which is grading the tape. The other place that pops up too is EPA, which is your essentially expected points added. So when you're on the field, what on a attempts or plays that you have, how many points are you adding above average to the rest of your offense and your team? And what we've seen is this is mostly a quarterback stat. And in terms of EPA, if you want to take a look at what really matters, you can take a look at the 2023 regular season. So last year, take a look at your EPA letters. you've got MVPs up in there. You've got studs. Jordan Love had a fantastic season. You've got Josh Allen up there, Dak Prescott. You can see how they at least were having an EPA of 106.7. Over time, they were able to add 100 or so points above what's expected for the most part to their relevant teams. Same thing as far as with quarterback rating. You got Brock Purdy ended up leading the NFL in quarterback rating, tied with Dak Prescott last year, in a year in which that we said Lamar Jackson was going to win the MVP award, but in a lot of cases we got to see that Niners team made it to the Super Bowl that year. We got to see how the Ravens made it all the way there. It's only 2 games, Marcos. It's a smaller sample size. But if you're a Cardinals fan, you have to be feeling pretty good at least about how after 2 weeks, you've got 2 quarterbacks up there in the EPA as far as Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, who are basically, would say like maybe not head and shoulders ahead of it, Josh Allen being the other. But between him and Derek Carr being over here, at least with the quarterback ranking, Kyler is right up there with Josh Allen in terms of being a top 5 quarterback in both QBR and in EPA, just alongside the likes of Geno Smith, who's played well, and Josh Allen. Marcos, this means that Kyler, at least for now, is playing at a top 3 level through 2 games. The question, of course, is how much of this can be fluky? Is this sustainable? I think when we take a look at the tape, what we're going to see is part of what I think a lot of Cardinals fans had seen some of last season in this offense with Kyler Murray being able to have some weapons, having a lot of a supporting cast. We thought he can finally flourish and become not just that star quarterback that he has been, but that superstar type of quarterback. And so far, it seems like that is that leap that Kyler's starting to take this year through the first 2 games.
Well, like let's hope so, because of course we're gonna have a gauntlet pretty soon, and that's actually gonna be the real test when it comes to it. Kyler Murray has probably his best games in the second game of the season. He had it against Las Vegas, and now he's having it right now with Los Angeles. But he obviously, like I mentioned before, like it has to be consistent. It has to be on a down by down basis. And for 2 games so far, I say he played within structure against the Buffalo Bills. He did do some things. He was mistake free for the most part, with the exception of the fumble that happened, which, by the way, like you mentioned, like the loose ball thing, like there's no way to get him out of doing that. So, but with like today, for example, like all the completions he had, the deep completions, the, threading it through threading the needle on a few of them and stuff, or making sure that he keeps his eyes downfield, even when he's scrambling. He did that, and that rating, like being so like great and perfect, from here on now, he knows where his baseline or what he can achieve or how good he can be, especially with these, playmakers that he has around him and whatnot. And that's why I kept pushing for someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. so much, because he is a tall, big wide receiver with great hands, and those type of throws that Larry Fitzgerald did when we all remember when he was a rookie up, like the young Larry Fitzgerald, where he would be double covered and he would still come down with the ball. That's the type of weapon that you would have with Marvin Harrison Jr. And you're getting him as a rookie, and from here he just is going to keep ascending from there on out. And I knew that, like, with that acquisition, Kyler Murray having bigger targets was only going to help him out when it comes down to like throwing the ball on, like, those type of, like get up and get him over defenders type of balls and stuff, because he's really good at being able to throw those. He's really good at being able to throw those back shoulder fades. And if you're just going to surround this guy like, Steve Keim was, with like shorter, speedy receivers, that's not what matters in that situation, because even if you burn somebody over the top, you still have to come down with it. And even if you're running at like 1,000 miles an hour, like the timing is exactly what you need your wide receivers to keep in mind. That first touchdown, Marvin did not run it at full speed, but if he runs it at full speed, he'll be out of bounds by the time Kyler Murray hits his drop. So he has to pace himself. He's got to be able to sell if he's going outside, and so he can get inside leverage. And then once that happens, Kyler, hit his drop, saw Marvin Harrison Jr. up the seam, threw the ball at the very back of the end zone where only he can catch it. And that's exactly where that completion came. So the chemistry is great. And like I said, going forward, that's exactly what I'm going to be focusing on is just this chemistry and the highlights that are going to come out of this because there will be more highlights. It's just natural to have two players that are like they're going to complement each other so well. One that's a scrambler and can find you down the field and is going to look for number 18 down the field, and the other one that knows how to get wide open on a scramble drill.
Right. The scramble drill is something I think I've talked about with a while of having a quarterback with the athleticism. I think that Murray and that mobility is something. But you brought up a good point, at least, to bring it to the table. The ability to have wider and larger targets compared to how the Cardinals previously were seeming to look at smaller, quick guys who could get downfield, could get separation. Being able to have some of the skies and size means that the sky's the limit. So this is a tweet that went over from Coach Dan Casey. We can go over it, which talks at least. And it shows Kyler throwing it up over two defenders and the high point catch from Trey McBride, something that is just perfectly placed. It's in a spot where only your guy is able to get it. The defender who's guarding the likes of Trey McBride is a linebacker. The other guy coming over there is a safety. Finding one of those mismatches and the defense paying attention to the other weapons that Arizona has is something that we've hoped would be a huge thing in this offense, because last year we saw teams say, hey, if we take away Trey McBride and we have a good run stuffing defense, you're going to have to hope you can get the ball to Greg Dortch, take some other passing plays. And we got to see that Kyler, by being able to dial up some of those early plays, which we'll start to break down here in a second, we are starting to see at least a team building sort of mentality that shows why the Cardinals are being able to put together a team that was able to beat the Rams that a Steve Keim team wasn't able to, at least since I believe the Jared Goff
Bruce
years.
Arians years.
At least, even the Bruce Arians years, they weren't winning those at home, and they had, I think, one win against Sean McVay in the entire time they've been playing him since he was the head coach of the Rams in 2017.
We didn't even beat him in 2015 when we went 13-3 for the season. That was the Todd
not
Gurley.
even that year. Not even that year. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Just they've been a thorn on our side. They've come to our own stadium, and these guys, and I've seen them before out in public. 99th and Camelback, that QT, the big LA Ram bus pulls over there. Everybody comes out with their jerseys, their little Aaron Donald 99 jerseys, and their whatever other Rams. It's mostly Aaron Donald. They get off, Cardinals fans mingle with them, and then we'll maybe they'll have a back and forth and whatnot. And, they come here and they celebrate in our damn stadium. And that irritates me. That happened to me last year. I went to that specific QT right by the stadium, and they came out in droves and they celebrated. And I was like, I want to send them back. I want to send them back home looking bad. And what a way to do it. They talk so much smack about Kyler Murray. Every single time they mention about how short he is, how somebody like him, especially when Aaron Donald was playing, they were like, look, man, we just got to get to him. We got to get to him once and we'll knock him out for the rest of the game. The little guy doesn't know how to throw over us. And it's like, look, the little guy just beat you guys. Bad.
Yeah, and that's something I think no one's, like we said, was benefited more from Aaron Donald, who's obviously one of the best NFL players of all time. I think people can say, obviously, of his era, a huge portion at least of that. One of the things that I think we can at least also discuss is there was a narrative after week 1 with Marvin Harrison Jr. that a lot of people were just shocked that he had only been targeted 3 times. He got 1 catch, at least for the most part, on those for just 4 yards. People were trying to look at what's some of the reason. People were shocked because they were like, all right, looking at the tape, some of these routes, I even said, doesn't feel like these routes are actually going to send the ball his way, or one of those balls that you throw and say, hey, Marv's in this one-on-one coverage, he can make a play. Some of that you can say is the cloud coverage that was being played by the Bills. We can see now in hindsight, the last 2 weeks in a row, it's been teams mostly dinking and dunking on the Bills to be able to move down the field just like the Cardinals did. But people looked back and went, hey, Marvin Harrison Jr. were taking a look at some of the tracking. People were wondering, is he someone who's going to be slow? This is something that came up at least from Seth Walder, who went through his account as an ESPN sports analytics writer, talked about and said, hey, Marvin's top speed was 16.7 miles per hour. Out of all the rookie receivers, the highest was somewhere around 21, 22. He just did not have that same type of speed. So the question was, did Marvin just not go through the draft? Is he just slower than he thinks? What's happening? And we have times that show that he reached up to 22 miles an hour in college. Some people wondered, mate, is he hurt? I had wondered, could COVID be a possibility? Was the game plan set up? Well, last week at least, what we were able to see is that Marvin did reach a miles per hour or so of 20 miles per hour. If you look at Harrison Jr. and you see at least some of the tracking that was on there, you're like, oh, all right, this is great. Some of the film at least really does show at least that his miles per hour was something that was overrated by fans. If you search for Marvin Harrison Jr. miles per hour, it went from Marvin looks slow, Marv is there to, oh, you know what? People are complaining about the top speed. People are saying it's too slow. A lot of people also are like, hey, like, why is it that this was even a narrative? Like his 16.7 at the top speed was so low that it should be something we worry about. We pretty much had that put to rest after the very first time that they actually started throwing the ball to Marvin, which I think is something that backs up what we were saying, which is people argued for Malik Neighbors, for Marvin Harrison Jr., for Romo Dunze even. At the end of the day, the expectation was that this is going to be an elite wide receiver prospect, and that adding that guy to this Cardinals offense was really going to make a huge boost to their offense. And I think that we see that in the film, and it's kind of that justification of, hey, we said throw the ball to Marvin. He's this great prospect. We did kind of get a taste of what that's going to be, and it's just in game 2 already, Marcos. Let's go ahead and we can move to breaking down the tape, but was there anything else that you had thought about with Marvin Harrison Jr. as we focus in on how the Cardinals getting him involved in the game allowed them to flood the Rams with a bunch of vertical passes that they just were not seemingly ready for?
You know, that narrative really, like, it took off because of like that clip from training camp where he's just gonna run freely with nobody, like, covering him or anything like that. He ran like a little slant and then he caught the ball. And I would say if anybody's gonna start a narrative, question, if you're gonna look at that and be like, hey, he looks slow, question more of the effort than the slowness, because I have no worries about him being slow. Now the effort, it's training camp. I'm not gonna hit him super hard on that. Yes, I want these guys to play all out and, basically, go out there and, play with their heart and, on a down to down basis, make sure that you're giving it your all. I understand that, but it's just one clip of a person running one route, a slant, just wide open. He's more so in those type of drills, more so trying to just catch with the triangle and, getting the feel for that. Not so much trying to like run the route and perfect the route. It's more so just like, hey, I'm getting my hands warm. So I saw that, and then they there's a certain YouTuber that went over like one route during the Bills where it's like he just doesn't look fast, and I was like, well, he wasn't meant to look fast. Like this whole thing about like wide receivers needing to play full speed, that's junk. You don't have to. First off, you don't have to be the fastest wide receiver to be successful. Second of all, timing is really important. So remember how I just mentioned to you, and we're going to bring up that. I'm assuming we're going to bring up that first touchdown, right? Because we could we could bring that up as well. If he runs full speed on that seam route, he's out of bounds by the time Kyler Murray throws that ball. So you have to time yourself. You don't have to run at full speed, and he also has long strides. So I think that narrative is just it's nothing.
Yeah, and that's something I think of. There's context that goes into some of those different areas. We could even see how after the game was done, it was one of those places where the Rams adjusted. Marvin had, I think, one more chance for a catch after that first quarter. It was a touchdown that was missed. There was a few more incomplete passes thrown his way, but some of that is just the connection between the quarterback and the receiver that we know is still something that's going to be in process. Let's go and move on to our film review. We're going to focus on the offense here and just kind of the first few drives, just to kind of take a look at some of how Arizona was able to manufacture that offense against the Rams. So here, as far as the first play of the game, you've got a pretty simple target to Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a little bit late as far as the timing. The ball is down and away where you can come back and get it. And this is one of the first plays where you're like, okay, like he steps, gets out of his break, comes back to the ball. Just a little bit off there as far as the timing. But first play of the game, you basically are setting up a play action fake and you throw it to Marvin. That's something that we wanted to see from the Bills game.
Yep, exactly. So they're already kind of showing like, hey, we're dedicated to trying to get that connection on these out routes, on these comeback routes, because I think that's where the connection is going to be the most felt, especially like on 3rd and 10, and he needs a first down. This is where he's gonna go. He's gonna go to these comeback and out routes, and hey, it's not gonna be perfect, but I mean, like they're getting their chemistry going, and he did complete a pass to him on a comeback in the same game.
Yeah, this is one of those areas of the speed of the NFL where he's kind of running, goes, and then you can see there's a little bit of a tug, comes back to the ball. Some of that is having to be able to up the game as a receiver, some of it's size, but there's also good plays that defensive backs can make. What we got to see from Arizona after this series, of course, was we were able to see on 2nd and 10. This is where the Cardinals, at least the run game, was something that we had questioned was going to be the case. You're going to see at least one particular player on this play, at least, who's able to kind of carve things up and open it up for James Conner to be able to run and get that first down. And it's going to be right up the middle. You're going to be talking about running what's called a duo block, I believe, is what this is. We'll show you what that looks like here. So this is your 12 personnel. You've got Michael Wilson moving across the screen. One of the things that we talked about last week was having a bit more as far as with not just pre-snap motion, but guys being able to move into motion. So here, Wilson moves up. That moves, shows you it's not playing man coverage across the board there. You're probably looking at not just zone, but probably what looks a bit like quarters, I'd say here, Marcos, is what it seems like. So at least this is going to be a run defense look where you got the two safeties who are back there. They're expecting at least if the tight ends will go out for the pass play. You've got numbers
like
at
quarters.
least inside. You got numbers in the box. When they're playing quarters, this is part of what we've seen with NFL teams. When you play cover two safeties are back. You play quarters. You know what beats quarters? Running the ball really well. So watch at least up the middle. You're going to have Froholt and the center, I should say the left guard. And then what this is called is a duo block. What that's going to mean is that you're going to end up having two guys going to take on one guy when you have a 5-down lineman. It's going to end up leaving a guy one-on-one for the most part. So you're always going to have at least a numbers mismatch. So here you at least see that you've got Hernandez, the guy that's being trusted against Braden Fisk. This is one of those plays of when you've got a duo block, Fisk is the guy who has to get off of his block. You have to be able to shed, stack, and get it. Normally in one of these types of plays, it'd either be Aaron Donald down the middle being double teamed, so that would allow someone else to be able to kind of come up. Or you're at least looking to see if you can have a guy be against Will Hernandez, like an Aaron Donald. And in this spot, look at how wide that hole is for James Conner to be able to run through. This is one of those examples, at least with Fisk, where he's not able to get free. You can see at least that he just is swatting and missing. It's also the safety coming over from the top. It just ends up being a great burst up the middle from James Conner, so you get a nice, easy first down. Taking a look at it here, but keep watching Fisk throughout the times because when he's on the field, a lot of times Arizona seemed to target him specifically, and that's not something that you want to be able to have with a rookie defensive tackle. Is there's going to be times you get targeted right up from the get-go. There's other times where you don't want to be that guy who's always targeted because that's going to make it where you're then the weakest link on your team. Here's another good run play, at least, Marcos, that we can at least see out of. I believe this is out of the pistol with Kyler Murray being able to have a little bit of a moving pocket.
Yeah, he went ahead and I think he took this for like 9. No, he did it for like 7 yards. But yeah, so on this specific play, like right here on. Oh, sorry, I muted myself. So he's in the pistol. He fakes a handoff, and the edge rusher and the defensive end who are tasked with, I think that's Tip Ryman and Paris Johnson. You see Froholt pull from the center position to try to help them out. And in some instances, it kind of creates a pick right in that situation because Tip Ryman, he's going to check, release, and then go to the flat. But doing so, he released his guy that Froholt was supposed to pick up on. These two guys kind of like slipped off, rushed through the outside. Paris Johnson doesn't hold his block. Froholt is getting there, but he didn't get the chip that he needed to kind of like make that defensive end go wider to have Kyler Murray stay in the pocket. But it didn't matter because the edge rusher got the angle that he wanted. The defensive end also got they basically just let everybody on that left side of the formation just get through, throwing everything off, but Kyler Murray is able to escape and get like 6 to 7 yards. So that's a gain on something that should have been a loss. So that's good when you have a quarterback that can do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and this play design, when you're taking a look at the L-22, it looks like it's one of those designs, like you said, where you've got Michael Wilson, you've got Trey McBride kind of running these downfield routes. Harrison, at least, is on the other side with the safety. You fake the look out of the pistol, and then when you look at how Kyler, as far as the pocket moving, what you're trying to do, I think, in this spot is you're maybe not quite going to have a bootleg, but you're giving Kyler an option. So if the edge rusher crashes down inside to try to kind of get the fastest line to the quarterback, Kyler can at least scramble around the outside to be able to make a play, and then suddenly you've got Tip Ryman available. Now, clearly, this isn't a screen. You can at least see how, like you said, the pass rush is getting to him for the most part, but this is at least one of those quick hitter routes where you draw the other guys open deep. Ryman's able to sneak out for the most part. You can quickly complete the pass. Murray ends up with a couple of guys in his face, so you have to be able to toss the ball at least over and get that light thing for a couple of yards. Clearly, you can see here the safety's running over. He ends up kind of improvising a little bit on the other side. So here you can see how it seems like with that chip that James Conner, he fakes it, kind of gets in to help, chips a little bit. Then you get out to help your quarterback. Whatever this play design at least was, it ran Kyler at least a little bit into pressure. And maybe the idea is we're going to at least have some of that pressure invited. We're not going to run a screen necessarily, but we're able to run a quick, short pass for the most part with Ryman. And if someone ends up sticking down with Ryman in the corner, you know you're going to get a matchup down the field with Michael Wilson or Trey McBride. Kyler, at least, this is where some of that backyard football comes in. Great contact balance. He's able to run and pick up a couple of yards to get around that corner. Whether you want to call it a broken play or not, it's one of those places of when you can get Kyler on the move with his feet, he has good instincts. And what's also fun is the way that this at least is drawn up. When you've got that chip in from James Conner, you at least have two blockers for him. He's just got a linebacker. He has to be able to beat Jared Verse at least off the edge to get some of those yards. The second down play is one of those that just kind of gets back to the bread and butter in the run game. They hand it off to James Conner. He is able to go and pick up a nice chunk play up the middle for first down. And again, remember what we had talked about, at least for the most part. So watch where the blocking is taking place. And what they're doing with James is they're essentially running right up through the middle. You've got Will Hernandez, Kelvin Beachum at least are getting up on these duo blocks here. You also see Paris Johnson is kind of the one who's carving some of that stuff open. And then what's really fun about this play is they take Elijah Higgins, who normally people don't think of him as a run blocker. He comes into motion in that play and is able to kind of be that ceiling block over here on the linebacker. That means that James Conner, he's got one man to beat. He's reading the duo blocks. He then just kind of cuts it up to the outside. And when the guy's not able to get free from Froholt, it just kind of shows at least how, when it comes down to some areas in the run game, being able to read your blocks, be able to get skinny, some of these kind of zone rushing schemes are something that Arizona really has not run for the most part. Since I would say the likes of Bruce Arians, they would run kind of that fashion bomb offense where you would run a lot of these power runs up the middle. You'd have like a no fullback for the most part. You'd have a lot of these tight ends. Now we've seen it, the Cardinals at least being able to use this 12 and 13 personnel, a lot of tight ends, getting some of these bodies in the run game. And also of note, if you want to see what's really fun about this, look what you got. You got two safeties deep. You got what looks like quarters coverage. What are they doing against that quarters coverage? Running the ball. This is part of a good play design and a good play call from Drew Petzing.
Yeah, they're trying to get them. They're trying to get them into like cover three, and these guys are stubborn because he's in the I formation now. I understand that now Kyler Murray throws from the I formation with those bootlegs. You know, the true bootlegs, not the play actions, you know, not the, you know, like the quick play action, like the hard play action. That's what, you know, people like Brett call it and stuff. That's the difference between under center and being in the shotgun or whatnot. Yeah. So they know that he can throw the ball from under center, but they clearly should know. And this is a failure on the defensive coordinator on his behalf to keep him in quarters. He kept them in quarters damn nearly this whole drive. Like, look at that. There's two high safeties again. So they're going to continuously keep punishing that. You're going to have six people in the box where we're just going to keep running inside zone. We're going to keep sending, you know, bodies up the middle. And like the pass play before that was horribly blocked. The run play after that was just a marvelous like treat to see, like seeing a pulling guard and seeing like Elijah Higgins motion before the snap and then be the wham block to seal a linebacker down the field, not even to get the defensive end at the edge, to get the guy down the field. All that was beautiful. Everybody got their block set. James Conner gets a 12-yard gain. That's beautiful football. I think you're muted.
Yeah, this is something we've wanted for years from this Cardinals offense, to be able to kind of run a modern NFL scheme that's able to use areas like, when you bring the men in motion, you're at least able to see that they've adjusted. It's very clearly a zone team that's running. Kyler's able to quickly get rid of the ball to take some of those yards. We all know that James Conner usually will make the first man miss. You end up with kind of a linebacker, I should say either a linebacker or maybe even a defensive end on him over there. They are just kind of able to continue to get some of these quick pass plays to the outside. When we see Cliff Kingsbury run some of those types of areas or bubble screens, what was interesting about some of those is we would end up seeing that a lot of them would be kind of similar to some of these results for the most part. What I think we've seen is a lot of cases is the bubble screens would be run when all these teams would crowd the box. They throw the bubble screen and then the defensive backs are not fooled. And this play here, 2nd and 8. Now this is where it gets kind of fun. Cardinals, at least right now, you're like, all right, they look like they're lined up over here in what seems to be, this would be your typical 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. It's not, actually. It's 13 personnel. This guy down here is Tip Ryman, splits out wide as in a wide receiver. Quarters coverage on the back end. They're running the same quarters coverage the whole time. So normally they'd say, hey, we could throw it up the middle, right? Well, the other thing you can know with quarters coverage is you can use play action. If you watch how the linebackers are going to at least bite on some of what the play action is going to be they at least don't even have to run it. They just are able to kind of have a sail concept. And this is what's kind of known as a quarters beater. There's a very similar play in college. I know that you mentioned Brett Coleman. He broke down how when you talk about air raid concepts, you're able to see a lot of times what teams would do is they'd spread teams out. And when you're playing quarters, you got 4 guys up against 4 guys. Guess what? Your zone coverage is now man coverage, because now you've got to play and defend that guy who's coming into your zone since you're spread out. So the Rams down here, they're at least playing. They've got everything seemingly covered. But what's nice about this play here is you got a couple different options. This play, in my opinion, is probably not even designed for Marvin Harrison Jr. When you take a look at this, I think they mentioned this after the game, but there's 2 options right here. So the idea is Marvin runs deep, and then you've got Trey McBride, who's able to kind of come open on the, I believe that's going to be a, not post route, corner route over there, I think at least, or he runs over at least on that side. I'll have to remember again. And you got a check down option to James Conner at least here on 2nd and 8 as well. So the idea then is a lot of the stuff as far as for the depth gets going deeper. But what Kyler's able to see on this play is, hey, look at where the safeties are at least before the play. You're able to look at, here we go, I'm pulling this up now. The safeties are stacked up where you've got the 2 guys who are there. But watch what happens when McBride goes up. You can see how Kyler looks and sees that Marvin in this situation, because he's running at least with his post, he's got inside leverage on this safety. This safety has got his hips flipped. He's facing Trey McBride in coverage. The 2 linebackers, at least, who are playing zone, and this is part of what happens with quarters, suddenly now you've got a 2-on-2 matchup, which basically means it's 1-on-1 for each of these guys. Once Marv gets the inside leverage, Kyler's able to notice there's no safety over the top there. He needs to be able to be back further in some of that place and that route, and instead he ends up kind of caving in to go for McBride. So call it what you will, as if it's maybe they studied the film well, they knew this would go after McBride. In any case, Kyler just looks and says, hey, there's no deep safety there. Marvin's got the inside leverage. That safety over here, he's so far off. He's like, I can just throw that ball. He floats it up, and then Marv makes a great catch with the toe drag swag down at the back of the end zone. He's always had great body control as a prospect. And this is one of those things that shows you that this is part of what being able to dissect a quarters coverage through a passing attack looks like. We see at least Kyler's able to read those 2 players on the one side. He doesn't have to come back to the other side. He's just able to read that safety, and you're able to see very quickly from the film angle. Yeah, Marv is just basically running up there. He's just running away from the guy. No one's able to get over there in time. It does also show if you throw that throw on a laser and the safety is a little bit closer to get over, sometimes it can be an area to knock that down. By floating the ball up like that, you're able to at least make sure that you're not able to see the safety come over and kind of step in front of that for a pick. It's just a great play overall. This goes for Marvin Harrison Jr.'s first catch of the game and his first touchdown as a Cardinal.
Yeah, so that route was a deep out. So this is a clear out route essentially.
Out route, yep.
he does have that option, and that's what I like. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about concepts. Multiple options. So he has an option to be able to hit Trey McBride if he wants to. But when he saw that inside leverage, which by the way, Tre'Davious White completely failed on that. This is 100% on him giving up that inside leverage to a wide receiver who's taller than you. And I already mentioned it to you before. Look at that, the pace he has to run at. He's not running full speed, because if he does, by the time he gets to the back of his drop, he's going to be out of bounds. So he's going to force Kyler Murray to have to laser it, just like you mentioned, just to try to make it a completion, which means there's a possibility for a play to be made either by Tre'Davious White, putting his hand up, or the safety jumping it and whatnot. Even if it's a laser, still has to travel a good distance. So good job on being able to float it over. The pacing did everything. And the timing between Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. is only going to get better from here on out.
Yeah, I think this is one of those examples of where, when you're talking about quarterbacks and concepts and being able to recognize where space is, when you're talking about how the Bills played their defense, they didn't let anyone get behind them. They kept everything in front. The Rams, not so they at least
not so
were
much.
Looking, they were at least were in this spot. Like you said, you get kind of a mismatch where Trey White, like we said, was a mismatch, where we thought Marvin would be able to do well against him. But it is one of those alignment areas, and Kyler, at least for his credit, he doesn't throw it into the spot in between where the safety and the cornerback are, because that's one of those ways where you can have the guy can maybe run and get hit, but he actually tosses it into the blank space where the guys are not, lets Marv go up and make a play for it, floats it just beautifully. This is one of those areas where I believe the stat was it was one of the least probable touchdowns of the entire year, which means there's like a 13% completion chance according to NFL's next gen stats, meaning this was a play where everything kind of had to go right from the throw to the catch to being able to catch the toes from how far back he has to get it in the end zone. And that's the kind of catches why you draft Marvin Harrison Jr., fourth overall, to be able to have a play like that. Now, one of the other things at least we can go over, of course, is going to be the very next play, of course. So Cardinals at least are able to force, I believe it is like a punt. They take over at the 40-yard line from what they're at. And this is one of the other things. Again, 13 personnel. You've got Marvin lined up as the X outside. It looks like it's going to be man coverage. You've got the 3 tight ends. So you've got Trey McBride and Tip Ryman are both on the right, and then over here on the left you can see Elijah Higgins. I think that there was someone who said that the Rams were not necessarily ready for the Cardinals 13 personnel as far as that choice. I don't think that they got confused. When I look at this lineup, this looks like they're playing stuff accurately for the run. I think it's more that when you have athletic tight ends like Trey McBride, a good blocker in Tip Ryman, and someone who we've seen has been a good pass-catching threat in Elijah Higgins, it forces you to have to be able to make some choices between those guys who can block and run. It's kind of like one of those modern NFL offenses. You think of like the Travis Kelce and a Noah Gray in Kansas City. If you can go to either guy, you're going to be in good shape. So here, this is going to be the hard sell on the play action. They're clearly running at least the outside zone, which is going to be the handoff. James Conner is able to kind of run through, pick through his blocks. Instead, you bootleg off of it. Suddenly, you've got at least an option where you can see how Tip Ryman, he's kind of there for the most part in terms of being able to just like account for this guy. He's not getting downfield for the most part because he's not necessarily running a route. He's just looking. You've got the crossing pattern from number 84 Higgins. He's kind of coming there after the snap is done. He's going to be almost like the running back for the short pass on this. This is one of those passing plays in which where it's pretty easy to determine where this passing concept is designed to go to. And it ain't to that right side of the field. Look at how Trey McBride, once he kind of gets in there and then releases, you can see what the defense does. They pay attention to him. He's running at least for this type of going to the end of the other side of the field. Kyler's running back over here. You've got him running away from the defensive line, and you're looking to see if you can kind of have him to stop, set his feet, throw that ball to Trey McBride. Marv is running across the middle, also on one of those plays where you're like, yeah, this seems like it's one of those clearing route plays. Like he takes the guy who's there, runs across the field. It's not quite a scissors concept, at least, but that's the idea of one kind of runs from the top down, the other goes from down to the top. And you can see, at least in this spot, you're like, hey, is McBride open? Well, what happens at least a second later is you can suddenly see as Kyler, he comes off of McBride because there's 4 guys that are over there on that side of the field. Trey McBride, instead of Marvin Harrison Jr., they're all watching Trey McBride. You can see here that safety immediately I think it's actually the cornerback, Trey White, like you said again. He immediately comes off of Marvin Harrison Jr., and so does the safety. So suddenly now Kyler's at least going through these quick reads, and this is like, it's so hard to play quarterback in a league. You got to make these snap decisions. What he's able to do in this spot is he's got the different options. He kind of turns around. You can see at least where McBride is. And you're like, hey, I can make a big play for that. But then he also stops, looks down, and notices, hey, look, all of those guys, they've got their helmets and their numbers are all pointed toward McBride. Meanwhile, look where Marvin's got that leverage. He's basically got no safety over the top for him. It's the same type of play as that one. What beautifully layers the throw in. Marvin dives for the pylon, gets Jonathan Gannon to yell at him post-game because, again, if you fumble that ball and it goes out of the end zone, that's going to be a turnover, basically a touchback to the Rams. But this is one of those examples, at least, of where you talk about an offense, a philosophy, and then a quarterback being able to read things coming all together. This is not anything different than from like a bootleg type of concept that then has a bunch of different crossing routes. You can see how the defense gets pretty mixed up. They have the guy who probably should have stayed. I think I can say even with this zone coverage that they're running, when you give crossing routes, you can really dissect zone coverage in two ways. One is you can run crossing routes to kind of rub guys free when you're talking about man coverage. That's part of where the mesh becomes a huge factor. But when you run this crossing route, you can see how Trey White has to stop and stay in his zone, because guess what happens if he abandons his zone, sticks with Marvin Harrison Jr., that safety's over here. Trey McBride's running to the end zone. So that's one of the cases where when you see about an offensive design and a game plan, the Cliff Kingsbury approach would be spread guys out, beat your one-on-one matchups, being able to have not as much separation, but you're able to kind of throw the ball. And then when you do have some of those zone concepts, you have a different sort of kind of some mesh and some shorter things to take care of it. This is more of, I think, what I'd say is the offensive approach that I think fits Kyler best, being able to get him on the move and even being able to make some of those gorgeous throws on the run. He just lays this up in here on the run perfectly, almost like a Steph Curry shot, at least for the most part, with a little wrist flick at least there at the end. Just lays it into the breadbasket, as they say, and MHJ does the rest.
Yeah, so that concept, and I've mentioned this one before, and I think the commentator even mentioned, I think it's Mark Sanchez, even kind of like doubled down on that. That concept wasn't designed to be that way. So this is why I love like bootlegs. And yes, you're right. We had to, for a long time, we've had to get Kyler Murray out in the open for vision reasons, and for the fact that like when we drafted him number 1 overall, to me, at the very least, what I thought is like, hey, if we're moving off of Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray has to be one of those quarterbacks that can throw on the run. So there's no excuses for it. Like he has to be a person that can laser it and throw on the run. We didn't see much of that, obviously, and they got to the point where it just became a situation where he wouldn't throw. He would just run for as much yards as he possibly could. So this is designed for him to roll out, obviously. So he's looking downfield. Higgins is the first read on that one. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the second read, but he's supposed to run cross field to the out of bounds area. But because that safety, instead of being top down when he was given that route, and actually you can kind of give the for Trey McBride to run that crosser and go into the corner of the end zone, and Kyler Murray having to come back to him. He actually cleared that out and made that happen by running upfield so fast, so well, getting that gravity. Of course, Tre'Davious White looking top down.
Tre'Davious White covered him, and part of that, as far as with, like you said, also with some of that coverage, like
look at number 3
zone, and he's following Marvin, and he stops, and then you can at least see that all of a sudden, and then they both look at Trey McBride. That basically is what ends up putting Marvin into that place, and again, just a gorgeous throw on the run.
Marvin read
cool.
Marvin read the leverage right there, and he knew that, like, instead of doing 9 out of 10 wide receivers in that situation would just continuously keep running. And it frustrates me because I think to myself, why would you keep running to the boundary, even though, like, I know you're designed to do that, but when you have leverage over the top, like you're stacked on top of the cornerback, you threw them out of phase on their technique. So now just go deep. Just go deep, because if your quarterback sees you and he throws the ball to you, that's exactly what's going to happen. And did you hear about them mentioning that he did like a little Space Jam Jordan type of thing where He was like,
Oh yeah,
it was like
stretching the
Michael
hand
Jordan.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the
It was like,
long arms at the very end where Michael is like imagining and he gets that final dunk in. He's just picturing all of a sudden his hand becomes animated like the Looney Tune and stretches out to get that
yeah,
last little
exactly.
dunk in. But oh yeah, and
He
it's one
wanted
of
it.
those spots at least too where the way that all of these concepts and stuff work together, it does kind of start and end with Kyler being able to not just process and make the right decision, but being able to make that throw there. Those are all areas that we've known he's been capable of playing. We've seen him play quarterback at a high level in the National Football League. But at this point, you're just like, Marv's already like going to be over 100 yards at least as of on the next play. So this is on the next series. You have a starting on the 99-yard line. So you're talking about like you're lining up in your own end zone. Cardinals end up doing a more traditional look. We've seen this plenty of times with Cliff Kingsbury. This is pretty much just going to be your 11 personnel look, which Cliff, you'd see a lot of 5 wide. You wouldn't see as much. Eventually, we finally got more of the 11 personnel, but you're going to end up seeing at least how they've got the 4 wide with 1 running back in the backfield. You at least aren't seeing any motions. This is more of like your typical out of the shotgun dropping back. You've got the opportunity to be able to potentially hand it off, but in this case, this is one of those spots where this is just a passing play all the way. You can at least see how you finally got that one safety look. So you got the 3 guys on the side of the field. You've got your 1 safety over the top for the most part. This is probably, from at least what I can tell, is going to be, and this is kind of what's fun too, is when you watch how the guys make their plays, you can kind of tell at least that this is going to be a basically a man coverage look, which is kind of fun. So when Kyler reads it and he's able to kind of recognize right away from this is part of film study and habits, you can see with the 1 safety over the top and the others down there, it's probably a man look. Watch how the safety, sometimes you can do cover man or like being able to have some different sides of zone, but the safety will end up following with 84. So part of this play, at least, is you got 2 options. You've got Marvin, if you can get him one-on-one coverage on the outside, the safety over the top. You've got 2 ways you can make the throw. If he sees the safety go down this way, you've got one-on-one over the top. You can make that long bomb for the most part. You also have the Rams in this situation. They're going to be lining up on the line. So you've got, at least what they're showing is you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys on the line, 1 over the tight end. They're kind of showing what looks like a blitz look. Kyler at least is seeing that, so he makes a quick adjustment of the play. That ends up being something where when he kind of shows that look, Kyler makes a little quick motion, and then when he snaps the ball, he just looks and then immediately goes to the outside, and he's got his mind made up ahead of the play. So if he ends up having like the safety runs over, there's enough space that's there, maybe you hold on to the ball a little while longer, then you can come back to this play side and you're going to at least see that you've got Trey McBride open underneath. This is one of those spots of where I think Brett Coleman called it F the fake or FTF, where essentially you don't got to play fake it. Like there would be a lot of times with Cliff's offense, we would see Kyler would snap the ball, fake the handoff to James Conner, and then drop back and then just start kind of processing the field, wait for someone to come open, and then throw the ball. Instead, he's like, I know what I'm going to do on this play. The safety has got the inside leverage, but he doesn't have. So if you throw the safety, the ball to the safety inside the numbers, you're not going to get there. If you throw the back shoulder fade, for the most part, now he does a little quick spot. That means it's going to be a quick passing play. He immediately just drops back, boom. And then he just hits that ball, throws that back shoulder fade. And unlike last week where Marvin and him were not on the same page, this time Marvin's looking back for the ball. He's able to essentially stop his trajectory in the air and make a great first down play to get out of trouble in the first quarter.
Yeah, it was actually interesting to see that not be a comeback, or not a comeback route, an out route, because that's what I pictured with Marvin Harrison, because that's exactly what he did with DeAndre Hopkins, like out routes all day and stuff. This was actually him more so just targeting Marvin Harrison Jr. directly, and then trusting that he was going to come down with the ball, which I think maybe that would be a better. I think because of the fact that Marvin's taller than DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not sure how his arm length is. I don't know if his hands are as big as DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins' hands were like huge. So, but the point is, like, with him having that larger body coming back to the ball, maybe they discussed this, practiced this last week, and maybe because Kyler Murray's going to talk to Marvin and say, hey,
it looks a lot better than it did a week ago. That's part of what you're saying. Like they're on the same page. So very clearly here, this is something where he just is able to, maybe this is the play all along. And he just does one of those checks, but it does seem very much like, hey, they got a guy who looks like he's blitzing here. We're going to get the ball out quick. Throws that back shoulder fade, and they're able to get out of trouble, pick up the first down. 1st and 10, they're able to go right back at least to being able to kind of run the ball up the middle. You can see here where they have the 13 personnel. This is going to be kind of one of those plays where this is just going to be, it's not counter where you're going to have your center kind of pull or move over for that one. It's just going to be kind of like an outside zone type of a play, or a zone play where all your guys are moving to the one side. More of a bread and butter run play. There's not like every play is going to be able to capture like 40 or so yards. You can see how Connor, at least here, you've got the one tight end is pulling the guy who's coming down on that spot. You've got Tip Ryman's kind of getting the second level on his blocks. You're trying to read where James then has to read where the players are so he can know to cut it upfield or kind of cut to the outside corner with the tight end. So good news, at least for the Rams, is when Higgins gets up over there, they do not give up that outside leverage. So he gets upfield pretty quick for the most part, but then immediately is able to stop himself. If he got upfield too far, he can just tuck behind Beachum and go the way there. So they're actually able to kind of tackle it after just only a few yards for the gain. I can see at least with how the run defense for the Rams is not too bad in this spot. It's just one of those cases, at least, where when you're talking about being able to run the ball effectively and efficiently, you're going to want to, as a Cardinals fan, be able to see the team not get committed to the run where they're just running the ball and the run 3 and out. You don't want to just get into these passing situations where, like we see often with the Cardinals offense, you want to make sure you can keep things balanced. Now this is a fun play that we'll get to see here as far as just a typical run play. As far as for the design, is something that I really like. So here you've got what is your 11 personnel with actually the tight ends. So then you got your 2 tight ends lined up here. So it's your 13 personnel. You got Kyler at least motions for James Conner to move to the other side, and then he kind of runs the ball off of that side with Kelvin Beachum out as a blocker in front of him. You can see at least here on that play that Beachum does get kind of taken out, so that's one of the avenues, at least with the linebacker play, that you can say is good. Here, if you don't make a dive to be able to take him out, Connor is able to get upfield. Harrison Jr. is able to keep his block. What's at least kind of fun is Kyler's seeing, at least from the numbers, you're like, hey, take a look at what you got over up front. You've got a cool little run adjustment where he gets to move to the other side. You're able to see exactly where the play at least was kind of blown up. And it's where Kelvin Beachum, by getting over, he just is not at least at that same athleticism or ability to blow someone up. He's a little bit slower to get over there, at least, as far as this is just kind of a typical counter play. So you run fake like you're running one side, hand off. And then this is one of those spots where you're also looking to see if Kyler is going to have the potential to keep the ball. It's a good play by the defense. Like, James tries to kind of run back a little bit, at least see if he can make something work, ends up losing some yardage on the play. We've seen sometimes he runs back and is able to make that happen. Other times he can't. They end up at least calling on that play. I believe also I think it was a holding call. So they end up backed up at 2nd and 20. So you're still at least mostly out of danger, but now at 2nd and 20, Kyler's still back in his own end zone. He's kind of having to make some things work. Takes the check down. It's a good job, at least, that's been done there. You can see at least there's a flag that gets pulled by the ref, and you can see where it happens. 37 pulls on Greg Dortch. Great job, at least there, where you can see how the route concept. McBride gets off to a slow start. Dortch is kind of the main read in this play. When you've got single high safety, you got the linebacker over the middle of the field. He gets held a little bit. You kind of got a small window in between that you can throw that passing play. Otherwise, you want to kind of come back to the Michael Wilson sort of play. So here, he gets kind of yanked by the one guy. You've got 2 linebackers, and then Kyler's like, all right, this ain't open. Nothing on this side of the field's open. He comes back to his other read. You've got 2 other options. You got James Conner is back there. This is where the pass protection holds up well against the 4 guys who rush. Michael Wilson at least is there. By the time that Kyler comes back around it, you can see good job by the edge rusher, who's there, number 0, in making sure, I think it's Byron Young actually, making sure that if Kyler's going to try to actually take off because of this deep coverage on 2nd and 20, you're going to have to force him back into the other runners. This is one of those passing plays where Kyler just makes the right decision, doesn't have it get batted down, throws it to Connor. Connor's able to make a guy miss, gets upfield, gets maybe 1 or 2 extra yards. You're kind of in one of these 3rd and long sort of situations now, but this is one of those places of where you kind of take what the defense gives you. The pass protection doesn't cave immediately. He's just able to kind of just take the quick, easy play, get out of trouble. James is able to, at least for his credit, make a guy miss and pick up like 3 or 4 extra yards. They also have, I believe, on this play, there is a penalty, I think, that gets called on the Rams when the Cardinals end up with the 1st down, so they run the ball on 1st and 10. And that ends up setting up, at least, on this 3rd, and I believe it's going to be Let's get to this play now over here. 3rd and 5, ball on the 17. This is the
This is the
other
play.
huge play that you're talking about as far as with the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. So you have two guys there back in the backfield, at least one of them being Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch runs out. All of a sudden, you see the defense adjust. You see now all of a sudden he's taking in. This is going to be clearly a zone defense that they're running, trying to keep stuff in front of them. And that's something you're going to get with teams against Kyler Murray. If you play man against Kyler, I think this was mentioned as well by some post game. You play man and everyone is man and looking all downfield covering their man. Nobody's on the quarterback. A zone defense is a good way to counter a quarterback being able to run with the football because you at least are covering in your zones to be able to come up and make that tackle. So Dortch picks up outside. You take a look at this defense. Marcos, what have we talked about this with the Cardinals? Again, what are the Rams playing here? It's another
They're playing
quarters
coverage. It's
yeah,
probably like I think the corners are playing palms technique, which is you'll see it. They'll just bump at the line of scrimmage.
Yep, they bump at the line, and then the safeties take it, and they kind of will sit in between for the most part with each of those. And so then you've got that coverage. This is honestly pretty well. The best play you can probably make, at least you would say, would be just kind of hitting it to Connor quickly on the check down. Quarters, this is part of what quarters does. Keep everything in front of you, keep everything in zone, make sure Kyler can't take off. He gets into a spot at least where the Rams bring a stunt, and we'll show this a little bit here for those of you watching on video. But at this spot, this is where the Rams, you talk about making adjustments, about how you can manufacture a pass rush. Rams do a great job in this of being able to get a free rusher on Kyler with the stunt. So watch 51, the linebacker, he's walking up onto the line. You can kind of see it looks like that he may be trying to go. He kind of drops back into coverage, and they do a defensive line stunt where 55 actually comes off of where he would be rushing toward Brown. They then run the other pass rusher and then see how he's pulling his man aside to try to get that free run in by pushing Paris in, pushing into Brown to make sure you can free that guy up. So here outside of like a Mahomes shovel pass to DeMercado, you can see at least with that they've done a good job of getting that free rusher. When you've got a free rusher, it's on the quarterback to either make the guy miss, get rid of the ball while taking a hit. What does Kyler do that he's done a lot before? He goes, whoop. He basically kind of ends up pulling around, ends up missing. You can see how I think it is Jared Verse, at least for the most part, is the other guy who comes around on that backside to try to clean it up. Actually, no, I think it's Byron Young is the one who does that. Actually, Zero, not Verse. That's a different play with Verse. So this is a well-designed stunt. This is something that we were seeing when the Chicago Bears run Monday Night Football. They were playing up against the I believe it was Houston Texans. Texans just ran these same stunts all day, and there was nowhere for Caleb Williams to go with the football. Kyler ends up at least in a spot where he's able to make a play with his legs, and then you can see here he's able to get the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. We're going to watch what Marvin does here on this play because it's very fun. So Kyler's running. You can see how they're playing that quarters coverage. When we talk about separation getting open, you can see here there's a small gap in between the two, the corner and the safety. This is part of where that palms technique, like you talked about, they're coming down to make sure that you can cover the running back out of the backfield. If the running back starts running upfield, then Kyler starts to run after him. You can cover that. And what Marv does here is he kind of does this instinctual area where he slows his roll a little bit. And he kind of baits like he's going to run back onto the inside route, kind of settle down a little bit. You can see that the safety starts to close in on him. If Kyler goes and throws the ball here, boom, that safety can at least make a play, make the tackle, or be able to disrupt it. And instead, Marvin just kind of runs forward, fakes, and then whips around the back end and just is able to kind of uncover and get open. This is something that like we never saw from the Cardinals guys and Andy Isabella or others. We would see it from Fitzgerald and Hopkins, but it's one of those areas of naturally being able to kind of understand the way a quarterback is running and getting open within the backyard football structure. Think of it kind of like the, hey, my goal in this play is I run my route, and if my route isn't there and the quarterback's running, I just got to get to where guys are not. And so he basically is able to bait the guy into coming in, and then whoop, goes back. Kyler buys a little bit of extra time and gets a huge pass completion down the field. And at this point, Marvin is basically at over 130 yards, I believe, at this point. Really nice design from Arizona to be able to actually have Dortch in the backfield as a running back, pull him out. Rams dial up a great pressure with the stunt to be able to get through there. And Kyler's just able to make that top play to Marvin, with Marvin being able to find that soft spot in the defense where 26 realizes, oh crap, I messed up. He immediately, once he sees what's happened, at least in that spot, Marvin just goes, whoop, mixes around. He just is realizing, oh, someone got behind us. And the Cardinals end up thriving with their defense. I think offense actually going down and making yet another touchdown on this series.
I think what 26 thought was that he was going to bait Kyler Murray into throwing that. So that would have never happened if there wasn't a runner going to the flats that same side. 31 Demarcado. Once he ran to the flat, Tre'Davious White had to hand off that assignment to his safety, because at that point, his job is just to protect the flat. So he handed it off to the safety. Safety was a little bit off, but you can kind of tell like he was kind of baiting Kyler Murray into like staying outside of the window, so that if Kyler decides, hey, I see Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm gonna throw it to him, he like just to get this completion, to get the first down. Not little did he know that Marvin Harrison Jr. was doing that on purpose, because if it was any other typical wide receiver, they would have stayed in position waiting for the ball, where Kyler Murray either has to throw the ball, get it intercepted, or just throw it and have an incompletion, or just run out of bounds and whatnot. But that's not what Marvin did. He baited him, turned around, was wide open. All Kyler Murray had to do was get it down there somewhere.
Yep. Let's finish up at least with this last play, just because we have to show this is like one of those plays where people talk about like MVP levels of play. You've got Kyler Murray at least here. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr. actually motions from the outside, comes down into the slot. You've got at least your one tight end and Higgins outside. You've got this is one of those plays where I believe Trey McBride actually isn't even on the field, so he gets kind of a breather. You end up with Dortch, with Wilson. You got your tight end is motioned out. So this is kind of like your 11 personnel, where you kind of have one of those like 11 personnel looks. Rams rush 4. You can see at least how this is a passing concept, where what they're essentially trying to do is see if they can get some of these guys as far as where they're open. The Rams against this quarters coverage play it super well. They're able to actually not have the protection they think that they will have with Paris. He kind of ends up getting pushed off of his balance, so it's a good rush from Jared Verse. James Conner is able to kind of protect him from getting right through to Murray by giving that huge shove, but as a result, Johnson falls down. Credit Verse for being able to get right in there. Kyler once again scrambles out the backside. You can see at least here it looks like Braden Fisk is looking there to try to wrap him up. All of the guys downfield, for the most part, are being well covered within this corner, this defense. You just didn't really have enough time as far as the play to develop, even with the protections as they were. Marvin is settling down right in between the two spots of the zone. This is at least a good spot of coverage. There's really nowhere to go with the football except for to Marvin Harrison Jr. It's pretty obvious that's where they decided they were going to go, because here he's got a safety and a linebacker in coverage on him. That's one of those things that we said we needed to see too. Move Marvin from outside, move him into the slot. Guess what? You won't be able to find guys who can cover him. This is just an area where the Verse makes a great play, comes after Murray. You either are going to have to throw this ball or be able to make a play. He makes a play with his legs, bails out the back end, runs up in the pocket. You can at least see he's able to get around from Fisk. Verse, at least for his credit, he gets a second shot at him. Like Paris at least is trying to get the one blocker, at least after he gets back up, when Fisk, who's coming at Murray. This is chaos going on here, because then no one's able to kind of pick up the other guy. It's almost like a weird reverse stunt, at least, where he comes back. Murray's able to make him get away, and it's just too much time. It's like about 8 seconds or so in the pocket. You can see downfield. You've got Higgins, who's there. He just reads Murray's eyes, runs sideways, and Kyler's able just to throw it right between that coverage in time. This is such a cool play that it went pretty viral for Kyler's celebration at the end of this. So Kyler's going to get the ball. He's going to end up feeling the pressure, kind of go, whoop. You don't have Johnson because he's on the ground. He gets away from one, runs back inside, realizes that these guys are inside here too, still gets away, and he's just throwing the ball, and then he holds that follow through like a Steph Curry 3. He holds that follow through, and then watch where the ball gets there. He sees the throw, and he starts celebrating, turns his head away before Higgins even has the catch. This catch isn't even there yet. He's already celebrating. That's a level of MVP swag right there, where Kyler is just like, he knows what he did. He made a great play. He doesn't even have to see that. He just knows Higgins is going to catch that ball, and Cardinals at that point, it's over. They've just basically gone up, at least with that point, to start the second half on that scoring drive. The Rams, for the most part, make a couple of passing plays, take some sacks. Cardinals kick a few field goals, but this was kind of the game over moment at this point.
Yep. After that, it's just like, hey, let's just go ahead and just, it's done. It's nothing they threw at them worked. They try to put so they had 4 down linemen. They got there with pressure. They lost contain because I believe everybody just got kind of greedy at that point.
Yeah.
So you saw the typical, the pockets collapsing, Kyler Murray putting his his head down and looking for any pass rushers coming in his direction. Makes a man miss, the same man miss. The guy who actually did have like a good pressure on that. Kyler Murray escaped, found Higgins, kept his eyes downfield like I want him to. Found Higgins down the field. Higgins makes the catch, and that's it. I mean,
Great.
Jesus Christ, that's a really, really, really good play.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of why Kyler, at least right now, as far as if you're talking about areas, I know it's too early to say MVP at some point, but through the first 2 weeks, we've seen a lot as far as for at least looking at Kyler Murray of taking that step that we as Cardinals fans have wanted him to take. That'll wrap it up for at least this preview. We'll be able to talk a little bit more about the defense, and later in this week, we will preview the upcoming game against the Detroit Lions. It's going to be another home game for the fans, at least. As we head out, Marcos, could you at least remind the rest of the fan base who's listening or watching, at least on our YouTube channel, making sure that if you don't want to follow or like or subscribe, at least for that one, at least go and say hi to us on our Twitter account. Do us a favor, at least for that, if you like the content that we're putting out here for the Cards.
Yeah, you can find me at Packing Soul on Twitter /X. And of course, we got our YouTube channel. If you're watching it from the YouTube channel or from Twitter, you can scan the QR code at the very top right of the screen. But that's where you can find us. You want to say hi, you want to ask any questions or anything like that, we're always available.
Absolutely. And of course, you can always follow me at Blake Murphy 7. Follow us on X at Redbird Reboot as well. Guys, Cardinals blew out the Rams. It's been a long time coming. It was well worth the wait. That's been the Redbird Reboot. It's time for us now to log off. Until later this week, guys, hope you have a good one, and go Cardinals.